How many people remember the 90s with fondness? Any 90s people in the room? Okay. How many of you were kids in the 90s? Okay, I was a 90s kid. How many of you were a teenager in the 90s? I was both a teenager and a kid in the 90s because I had that weird age group that shifted in that decade. How many of you were young adults in the 90s? All right. If you remember the 90s, then you remember this amazing device that came out called the pager. How many people remember pagers? Now, when I was in high school, specifically my sophomore and junior year of high school, pagers were all the rage. And actually, these are pretty sweet pagers because they got color cases on them. For my younger friends in the room, most of the time when you first saw a pager, when they first hit the market, they were like the boring black little boxes that cops wear on their shoulders. I don't even know why they still have pagers, but I guess they do. And doctors have pagers, I guess, still as well. And for my younger friends in the room that are not sure what a pager is, here's how a pager works. It's a wireless device like your cell phone, only no one talks on it. And if you want to send a message to a pager, you would go to a landline, pick up the phone, those are the ones with the cords that go into the wall, and you would dial someone's pager number. And you would, after the tone, type a phone number in. And when you hung up, that phone number would show up on that screen. And the screen was not in color. The screen looked like a basic calculator, okay? That's what a pager did. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, one-way direction? How boring, how lame. I mean, give us a break. This is revolutionary. Before this, if I wasn't at home, I don't know, you had to send a carrier pigeon after me to be able to get a hold of me. Now, when I tell my son, who's 10 years old, a story about the 90s, you won't believe, and he's not trying to insult me, but you won't believe the insult that comes out of his mouth. Oh, you mean the 1900s, Dad? Making me feel like I'm a century old or something. Now, this was the pager that I had in high school. This was my favorite pager of all the pagers. And if you were a teenager and had a pager, one of the things we would do is we would obviously change the case on our pager. Then you'd go to school and you'd swap parts with other people. Like that battery clip. Pro tip, swap your battery clip with someone else. This guy needed to level up because his holster was still the wrong color. There's actually a holster on that, which has nothing to do with the story. So, here we go. As teenagers, we decided just having a phone number on the screen for you to call me back was pretty lame. And so we, along with everybody else in America, came up with a language called pager code. And pager code was something where the letters on the screen were actually phone numbers. And you had to read these phone numbers in a way that would tell you what someone was trying to say to you. Like hello or goodbye or come on over to my house or something of that nature. Now, there is only so many letter combinations you can do on a calculator where you flip it 180, right? Because we've all done the hello on a calculator. And so we came up with pager code. For example, the number 8 represented the letter A. Why? Because 8A, 8A. See how it works? Or sometimes we would do the letter G would be the number 6 because a 6 looks like a G. And do you know what M was? How many 90s kids do we have? What's M? Anyone? 177, very good. And you might be thinking, that's a random number for M, 177, only because you don't see it typed on the screen. Think about it, at 177. It looks like an M on the screen. Now, in high school, if we brought our pagers to school, they would be confiscated, at least in the school I grew up in. I grew up in California and Los Angeles, and we had a drug problem at our school. And so the school district decided, we know how we'll get a hold of it. We'll make all pagers against the rules because drug dealers have pagers. That was the decision they made. And so if you were caught at school with a pager, they would confiscate it. The first time you get it after school, the second time you get caught, you don't get it back till the end of the school year. And so all of us learned really quickly, hide your pagers and make sure they're on silent. But that didn't stop us from sending messages to each other, right? How did you send messages in class to each other before pagers? Passing notes, right? Now, how many people have had their note caught by a teacher? And what's the teacher do? If you're old, like me, they take your note and they write it on a thing called the overhead projector. If you're younger, they just write it on the board, and they correct your grammar in front of the class, and everybody knows that you're asking Miss Susie out and had a yes or a no line for her to check, right? So I decided, well, everybody knows pager code. Let's stop writing in English, and let's just start writing numbers on this letter. And I remember when Miss Manning, my social studies teacher, grabbed my note that I really wasn't trying to hide because I wanted to test my theory, and looked down with a confused face. The page was just filled with numbers. And she knew it wasn't just my handwriting, that they were writing back and forth towards me. And she knew that there was conversation happening, and she knew some kind of message was on that page, but she could not read it. Now, I tell you that story because some of us read Revelation and we're like, what? Like, I am reading the words of this page, but what does this even mean? I am so confused by what I'm reading here. And so over the last few weeks, I have given you a key to understanding some of the language that you will come across in Revelation. Like, for example, the biggest thing that we need to know about Revelation is that it is designed to reveal Christ to you. This book should show you how much Christ loves you and how much he cares for you and how he's trying to pull out all the stops to give you as much time as possible for you to find and follow him. He wants a relationship with you, but he doesn't just want a relationship with you. He wants to be your God. And he wants to help you become the person you're called to be, live on purpose, and get away from whatever snares are holding you back from that lifestyle. He wants you to run with endurance in a way that helps you thrive for his kingdom's sake. And so as we read Revelation, you get to learn about a God who cares about you and your life and what is going on in your life. The second thing that we've learned about Revelation over the last few weeks is that these scriptures are not designed to scare us. So many people in the church have used Revelation wrong as a tool to try to scare people into heaven. And I don't know, everything I've read in here, there's some warnings, there are some consequences to the way we live our life, and if you decide to follow Jesus or not, it could turn out not so great. But in here, I don't see Jesus as a God of fear and scare. He's real, and he'll tell you how it is, but he's not trying to scare you, he's trying to inspire you. And so the book of Revelation shouldn't scare you, but it should prepare you for what's to come. Speaking of that, Revelation should help us realize that time is of the essence. Time's ticking, right? And so far, this series that we've been unpacking, we realize there is only so many moments left before the end time prophecy kicks in. And every moment that passes by, we're one moment closer to all of these prophecies starting to take place. And so, because of that, we should live lives that honor God and do whatever it takes to help people experience Jesus. Now, also, we've talked about this last thing that will help you understand Revelation. There are 3 timelines taking place: past, present, and future. And as we read these scriptures, you'll see times where there's stuff written about the past. For example, we've been going through some letters that Jesus wrote to 7 different churches. And those were real churches with real people that had real challenges. And so in one way, you could read those letters and see that it's talking about the past. And at the same time, we could read those letters and see that it refers to the present, because these letters are 100% applicable to our walk with God. And there's some encouragement in there on how we could live to grow our faith and continue to follow Jesus that's proper. And then there's some other areas where he's like, you shouldn't do that. I have something bigger for you, something better for you planned than that. And so you could read it with the context of the present. And at the same time, we will see things that are to come. There are some verses that are specific about things to come that have not happened yet. And then there are verses like the one we're in today, where it's all 3, past, present, and future, because we start to see denominations and churches all around America making some decisions that are not so great, that we've read all about in the last few weeks. And sure, these were letters written to the past, but they're so applicable to what major denominations are struggling with today. And so like I said, we are diving back into Revelation, and if you brought your Bible today, go ahead and turn to Revelation chapter 3. If you didn't bring your Bible, don't worry. We'll have all the verses on the screen for you. So far, we've read 5 letters to the church that Jesus wrote, and we're going to finish off by reading the last 2 letters today. And the first letter, or the first church we're going to talk about, is the church of Philadelphia. Philadelphia. Philly. I always wondered back in the Bible if they called it Philly back then too, or is that just us? I don't know. Did the cheesesteak start then, or did it come from our Philadelphia? I don't know. These are questions I guess I got to ask God when we get there. I'm sure a history buff could tell me that. So we're going to be looking at the church of Philadelphia and what Jesus had to write to this church. So let's jump in to Revelation chapter 3, verse 7. Now, Philadelphia and Laodicea, we're going to read about those 2 churches. And those 2 churches have been nicknamed the end days churches because what they faced are what many churches face right before the end time prophecy kicks in. Revelation chapter 3, verse 7. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true one, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. And I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 things that I want you to know about this verse as we unpack what's happening here. The first thing that I want you to know about this verse is that Jesus has given us an unprecedented open door. There are some opportunities ahead of us today that are different than any other time. Now, what does the open door mean? Well, it means opportunity, and the key to that door is God's authority. And so in this verse, if you go back and read it knowing this, you could see that all the opportunities that God is giving you are under his authority. And it's God who is opening doors and God who closed doors. It's not the other way around. It's not like, oh, society and what culture's doing or the circumstances I'm in closed the door. No. In fact, Paul says it this way, that we should be praying for these opportunities of these doors opening. Check out 2 Corinthians. Furthermore, when I come to Troas to preach Christ's gospel, and a door was open unto me of the Lord. Again, there was an opportunity for him to go and speak the good news Jesus story. And as we live our life, I would encourage you today, pray, God, where I go today, whether that be work or the gym or to whatever kid's birthday party I'm involved with, help me live for you and see the opportunities that you're putting before me to live for you in a way that will help people find and follow you. Now, I'm not saying everywhere you go you have to preach a sermon, okay? That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is we represent Christ in these opportunities. And there is a reason why you're alive. There's a good reason you're here. And I believe that God has divine opportunities every day for each and every Christ follower to step into. And it's up to us if we're going to pray and ask God to reveal to us what that opportunity is today. Paul says it this way in Colossians chapter 4 when he talks about this door of opportunity. With all praying also for us that God would speak unto us a door of utterance to speak the mystery of Christ. That God would open unto us a door of utterance to speak the mystery of Christ. Again, he's referring to these opportunities to share the gospel. Now, sometimes we think, again, that a door is closing because of the situations we're going through in life. Like maybe hard times are hitting your life and, oh, it's closed. There's no opportunity in my life. Let's talk about COVID. What happened in the church around the world? Churches shut their door during COVID. And I know in Alabama, your churches were not closed as long because you guys believe in freedom here. But in California, where I'm from, we didn't go back to church for over a year, at least in-person attendance in the room. And if you did, the law would come after you, and they would arrest you or fine you for meeting in church, all because people believed you could get sick if you got together. Now, as we have come over the last few years, COVID has simmered down and it's not as scary now to us. And so we've kind of returned to life as normal. And many people looked at the doors of the church closing, especially pastors, like, man, what are we to do? Our opportunity to preach the gospel just disappeared and to reach people for Christ. That's not so. Just because you need to change your tactic doesn't mean that the doors of opportunity have closed. Many churches started food pantries and giveaway systems and started serving people in the time of need, started serving the first responders. But you know what I think is even most amazing about COVID and the local church? Let's say just look at America. What's amazing is that mom and pop churches, not mega churches, because they already had this, but the mom and pop churches all the way to medium-sized churches, they all became broadcast facilities. Almost every church in America streams online. And that's amazing to me. I have a background in broadcast and marketing. Before I was ever a pastor, that's what I did for a living. And I understand how this room is wired, okay? I'm just a nerd that way. I understand how the lights work, the wall works, the soundboard to some extent. Like, I understand and I have a basic idea of what's happening in this room. But many mom and pop churches didn't have any technology, didn't understand what streaming or broadcast or anything is. And it probably, if you went back, 6 years and talked to people in this room and said, hey, one day you'll have robotic cameras at Wilson Avenue and it will stream live to the internet, and as many people as possible can log on and you won't even get a bill for the amount of people watching online, no matter how many watch online. People would probably laugh at you, right? And then if you told them, yeah, and that'll happen in 5 years, they'd be like, what? And then here we are. A church that runs about 300 to 350 people has robotic cameras. Now, why do I tell you this? Because God gave us opportunity to go into broadcast. And that's way before Pastor Chris ever got here. You guys were doing that before me. And what's cool about that is that all of our friends now have this resource. Like, there are so many of you that we're cheering on and praying for to have safe travels this weekend. Whether if you're out hunting a deer in the woods, because I know it's the kids' weekend to hunt the deer in the woods. So after you get that deer and you actually can listen to it without scaring away the deer, we're cheering you on. Or our Girl Scout troop that has ballooned into 30 or 40 of our kids that are away camping for the weekend. We're cheering you on. Or maybe you're just sick at home and you're watching online. Or maybe you're traveling. You're going on vacation. Regardless, this broadcast has allowed you to stay current with what our church is doing and to not miss out on what's happening here in church. And we miss you and we look forward to you coming again. And so God's created new opportunities for our church through that. How about this? Something heard my voice over there. That's okay. Siri does that to me too. How about this? The front door of our church is no longer that glass door. The front door of our church is Facebook. A lot of the guests I'll talk to, or when people choose to join our church and I get to talk to them, well, tell me your Wilson Avenue story. Like, how did you end up here? Why did you stay? I go, well, so-and-so went here, and then I started watching online for a few weeks. And there are people who are watching today that are making a decision if they'll come in person one day. Hi, we hope you do, and we can't wait to get to know you. These are all opportunities. And so sometimes we could look to negative things and be like, oh, there's no opportunity left. But we've got to remember, it's not us, it's not circumstances that closes the door, it's God. And so if God's not closing the door, then there are still opportunities left. Now, there are other opportunities coming up too. Like, I believe because we're in this season of time, that there will be people who will be more open to Christ than ever before. Let me say it this way. There are people who used to shut out Christ and be really cold to the idea of ever believing in Christ that are coming around. Have you noticed that? Maybe you have family members recently that committed their life to Christ. Maybe you have neighbors or coworkers who you thought never would commit their life to Christ. They're coming around. I have a friend. I'm trying not to say his name. I have a friend, and I would say he was agnostic at best, where he kind of believed in God, but it was like, could be any God, could be an energy, could be anonymous God that we don't know about. And I love this dude. Like, he is one of my best friends. And I believe in Jesus, right? And I know Jesus is the one and only way. And so I'm trying to convince him all about Jesus talking, and he's talking to me about philosophy and thoughts, and we're going back and forth, and no dice. And we're talking hours of conversation, not in one night, but many times. Every time we go visit, there'd be at least one spiritual checkup that we would talk about God. And recently, he called me. And he said, I've come to believe in Jesus. And my jaw about hit the ground. Are you kidding me? Why? What caused you to start believing? He's like, well, you know what? All this artificial intelligence just started getting to me, and I started thinking about it. Then I saw the wars in Ukraine. Then we had Israel getting attacked in Gaza, and he's like, and all the turbulence, and then we had the civil unrest, and just everything started stacking up. And I thought, maybe there is something to this God. Maybe this world's logic is flawed, and he came to faith. There is opportunities coming up, and I believe they're unprecedented in the last days that many people will come to faith. In fact, I believe it this way. I believe in the last days there will be a great spiritual awakening, that revivals will look small compared to what will happen in the days before the end times prophecy takes place. Let's go to number 2. The second thing I want you to know about this verse and what I believe Jesus is trying to teach us is that God has given us enough strength to do what he's called us to do. Again, this verse says it this way. It says, I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have little power, but you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Little power. He's not saying like y'all weak. What he is saying is kind of like, well, have you ever had the flu? I hate the flu. That queasy feeling where you're constantly throwing up, and then you're bedridden for a few days, and then you start to think you're getting better, and you stand up, and you're better than where you were, but you're not 100%. You're like 30% still queasy, right? That's the kind of little power that this verse is talking about. And this is what I mean, that I think there'll be a great spiritual awakening. Not just outsiders will come to faith, but I think the local church is going to have a great spiritual awakening, because there are a lot of church people who are kind of pseudo-asleep. Some of you literally right now. But there are some church people who are spiritually asleep or kind of in a lull. And I think in the end times, the church will have this great awakening and start to regain strength and start to live for Jesus, knowing that the time is of the essence. Again, time is ticking, and we have to help people find and follow Jesus as fast as possible with all of our efforts, because we don't want people to miss out on this God-sized opportunity called a relationship with Christ. We don't want them to spend eternity away from Christ in hell. And this stuff matters. Here's the third thing that I think this verse is teaching us, that Jesus promises to keep us from the great tribulation period. Verse 10 says this, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world. Terrible times will hit your life. You're going to go through challenges. There will be struggles at times. None of that will compare to what the great tribulation will be like. If you're new to Christianity and you're not even sure what this tribulation is, just know it's kind of like a preliminary judgment from God on the world, like a last-ditch effort to help people snap back and say, okay, I believe in Jesus. I'm going to come to faith before the ultimate judgment day happens. Okay, so we've read some letters throughout the last 3 weeks. And in these letters that were written to the local church, we saw that some churches make Jesus weep. Like it hurts his heart and he starts to tear up over it. We saw that some churches frustrate Jesus, and he's kind of like, what's going on with this church? And the last church that we're going to talk about makes him sick. The Laodicean church made Jesus sick. Now, this is what matters, because I think if any of these letters represents most Christian Americans, it's this church. Check out what is written in chapter 3, verse 14. And to the angel of the church of Laodicea, the words of the Amen and the faithful and the true witness in the beginning of God's creation. I know your works. I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. I would rather you be cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Ugh. Okay, here's what's happening. Because we read this word and we're like, lukewarm water, I mean, yeah, we all like it cold, but it isn't that bad. Like, what's that wrong with lukewarm water? Context is everything. Okay, Laodicea was in this area where there was aqueducts going underground. The water traveled underground. And I'm not sure how this water traveled underground, but however it was traveling, it picked up flavors that were terrible. Some of it minerals, some of it stuff that I don't even want to mention. And if you were traveling through town and you went to drink from their water well, and you didn't know that their water tasted this way, your common reaction is to spit it up because you think something's foul in the water. Something just ain't right. What Jesus is doing is he's referring to their walk with God, and he's showing them something about where they're at spiritually in an area that's sensitive to them. You see, they're a little embarrassed. They're a little insecure about this problem, that they're known as a town with gross, nasty water. And the hard part is, water that's not too far away, there's like hot springs in the next region over. And those hot springs are great water. And then in a region on the other direction, there's like fresh mountain spring water that's cool. And we all love some mountain spring water, don't we? At least I do on the cover of my Arrowhead bottles. And so there's water that's known as good around them in regions not too far away, but this town and this place, their water is nasty. Okay, if Jesus was writing this same letter to Pastor Chris, here's how it would go. My insecurity and then saying that I'm a lukewarm Christian, here's how Jesus would say it. Chris, you're neither slim skinny or fit muscular, but you are chubby, okay? You are chubby. I would rather you be skinny, slim, or fit and muscular, but you're neither. You're chubby. And that is why, if you ever go to the beach with me, I am hashtag swim shirt all day long. I am not taking my shirt off at the beach for two big reasons. One, you don't need to see that whiteness when that shirt comes off. It will blind you. But before it blinds you, the image you see will haunt you for the rest of your life, okay? He was saying something to them that could be better, something that wasn't just right, an insecurity of them. And he was showing them that spiritually, you should be better than you are. For example, he was saying that this church was neither spiritually cold nor hot, but merely lukewarm. So what does that mean? Let's go ahead and throw a legend up there. Cold means someone who's not a believer. You've yet to come to faith. Hot means you're fired up for Christ. You're excited about what God's doing. If you're fired up for Christ, you can't wait to read your Bible because you just know God's going to tell you something unique and new about your life today. If you're fired up for Christ, guess what? You can't wait to talk to God, and not just because you're going to ask him to do things in your life. If you're fired up for Christ, you can't wait to get to church because it's an opportunity for you to feel his Holy Spirit and sing to him. If you're fired up for Christ, you can't wait to get to the small group because you can't wait to see what they're going to learn about at group this week. And you're so excited to have brothers and sisters in faith that are becoming your friends that can encourage you to be even yet a better Christ follower. You're fired up for Christ, and you're so excited about the potential that God's going to do in your life. You don't know what he's going to do, but you're excited about it. You know that next year holds opportunities and miracles that God will do in and through you because you're fired up for Christ, right? But most Americans find themselves as a lukewarm Christian. And that's kind of somewhere in between being fired up for Christ and a non-believer. Now, here's the problem with the lukewarm Christian. The problem with the lukewarm Christian is they think they're more spiritual than they actually are. They're in denial. That's what we called it in recovery when I went to recovery. They're in denial. And denial is a dangerous thing Because when you're in denial, you refuse to believe that you have a problem. You refuse to actually see the reality as it is. And when we have lukewarm Christians who are in denial, they're usually the last ones to find out they're lukewarm. Because, let's admit it, we all can see it from a mile away. When you come in contact with someone who's a lukewarm Christian, you know it. How do you know it? By the way they treat people, by the way they talk about people or talk in general, by the way they interact with God, how rarely they're ever telling you about what God's doing in their life or something they've learned this week or whatever. Their interaction in the local church is sparse. Not all people, but a lukewarm definitely is going to have sparse. Maybe not connected to community, doesn't maybe know too many people. We're lukewarm. Now here's the good news. If you find yourself in a lukewarm setting where you're neither spiritually hot or cold, don't worry. Because in all of these letters, Jesus ends the letter with opportunity. Opportunity for us to course correct behavior and to fix this. Now, how have I, as a Christ follower, before as a Christian or pastor and after as a pastor, chosen to try to avoid being lukewarm? And I'll admit it, there's been times in my walk with Jesus that I was just lukewarm. Well, I came up with a process. Well, I didn't come up. I learned a process early in my walk with Jesus that I've adopted into my life as an evaluation tool that tells me what my spiritual temperature is. And you've probably heard it before. It's called the time, talent, treasure. Time, talent, treasure. And usually if you evaluate your life this way, it will tell you what your spiritual temperature looks like. For example, time. Let's talk about time. Do you spend time with Christ? Like, are you praying to Christ? I don't mean like once or twice this year, but are you actively throughout the week praying? Are you doing it daily? What about reading? When's the last time you opened up God's written word? I think all of us would agree that the church should believe that this is God's written word, his authority, and that we should not stray from the teachings of this book, and we shouldn't change this book because it's important. And even though Christians can all agree on that, we can then do that personally in our lives and act like it's okay. Have you spent time in God's written word? You know, so much we ask, God, speak to me, show me a sign. The sign and God speaking to you, it's right here in these pages. He wants to reveal things to you. You just got to get in there. Well, last time I read, I didn't see anything. Make it a habit. Get good at it. Keep practicing it. Align your heart. Eventually, you'll start developing ears to hear and eyes to see what Jesus is trying to communicate through the text. Are you spending time with Christ? Here's another way we spend time with Christ. Are you evaluating how you're living your life and thinking, what would Christ say about that? How would Christ respond to the way I treated that person? How would Christ respond to me doing that and partaking in that? How would Christ respond to me choosing to opt out or get involved with that? Are you evaluating your life and then talking to Christ about it? Christ, Jesus, I just don't know. I just don't know if I should take this job or not. Well, give it to Jesus and talk to him and let it simmer for a bit. I don't know how Christ would respond to that. We'll start talking to Jesus. He'll reveal it. He'll put it in your heart. He'll nudge your heart if you feel peace at it or not. Are you spending time with Christ? Here's another way that we could check our spiritual temperature with time. Are you spending time with brothers and sisters in faith? Community is key to your walk with Jesus. No one was created to do life in isolation. We were all created to do life in the context of community. And that's what's awesome about a church. A church is community. And so, what does that mean? Do you have someone pouring into your life who encourages your walk with Jesus to help you become a better woman of God or a better man of God? This is called discipleship, and we're all called to get someone to pour into their lives. I have 2 or 3 people who are pouring into my life constantly to help me, encourage me to be a better Christian. And are you pouring into other people's lives, encouraging them, cheering them on? Or maybe you're at the phase where you're ready to disciple and pour back into their life. And it's a both and, where we're receiving from one and we're giving to another. Are you spending time with people? And if the answer is no to those, it's like pouring cool water in that spiritual tank, and you're just dropping the temperature. If you don't spend time praying, cool water. If you don't spend time reading, more cool water. If you don't spend time with Christian brothers and sisters that can encourage you and grow you in your faith, more cool water. If you're not encouraging people in their faith, more cool water. Now, I'm not saying you're bad if you're missing some of these. These are all areas, and we all have improvement we can do in our walk with Jesus. But we're trying to figure out what our overall spiritual temperature is at. And you got to ask yourself, in the time category, is it spiritually hot, lukewarm, or cold? Let's get to talent. What does talent mean? Well, do you serve? Do you serve others? And do you serve in the local church? We say all the time here that the church is the hope for the world. And if the church is the hope for the world, then shouldn't we be actively involved in what God is doing in and through the church to change the world? And so I would say if you don't serve, maybe that's a little bit more cool water. And maybe you serve in an interesting way. So it's not a greeter team or a kids team, which God bless the kids workers. My kids are back there and they are wild animals. Maybe you serve like the widows and the orphans, and so you come in midweek. Like I know some gentlemen in our church that built a wheelchair ramp for one of our widows in the church recently. Way to go. You're serving with your talent. There's people who are coming in midweek and painting walls. Way to go. You're serving with your talent. Keep it up. But find a way to get involved. Chris, my body is not what it used to be. I'm frail. I can't move. Can you pray? Because we have hundreds of prayer requests that come in per month. And I'm sure they would like more than just Pastor Chris praying for them. We would love for you to join the prayer team and start praying for these people, going through all kinds of things. So serving, a little bit hot water, a little bit cold water, depending on what the answer is. Let me ask this on your serving, because sometimes we can start serving out of obligation, out of ritual. And are you serving because, I said yes, and now I've got to go back and serve. I don't want to serve. Usually when it's out of toxic obligation or ritual, it's not because anything wrong the church is doing. I mean, maybe there is, but most often it goes back to your time. Because when you spend time with Jesus, it fills your cup up. And what Scripture says? Overflowing, right? We're to overflow. And when you serve, you should be naturally wanting to serve because you're so excited what God is doing in you that you want to change people's lives for the better. And you know the church is a hope for the world, so here we go. I'm super excited to get onto a team and serve. But when we go back to obligation and ritual, your cup's no longer full. And the water probably sitting stagnant. We all know what stagnant water's like. Lukewarm that makes you spit it out because it's gross, right? And so do you serve? Are you serving like it's an obligation or a ritual? Again, these answers could mean spiritually hot water or cool water going into your spiritual thermometer. And let's talk about treasure, the last one on the chart. The one that's usually the last in the spiritual formation process for people to get warm. I mean, sometimes we think, well, I know, Chris, I'll get hot with my time with Jesus, hot with my talent, and I'll just be ice cold over here, and we'll equal out okay. I'll double down on talent. I'll double down on time, and I'll just be good for treasure. You can tell yourself that, but what happens when I throw ice cubes in a hot glass of tea? It cools that tea down, right? And so it's all about having a balance here where you're making sure that each category has warmth to it. So you get above being lukewarm. And so let me ask some questions that I have used to be able to discern if I'm being lukewarm when it comes to my generosity. Because treasure has to do with our giving of our finances towards God. First, do I get angry? Do I get angry and uncomfortable when the church talks about money? And if so, I've got to ask myself, is it because I'm spiritually cold in this area? Because I'm lukewarm in this area? And the temperature rise is just too much for me, so I'm just a little uncomfortable. And so, cool water. Now, some of you have taken us up on the challenge where we encourage you, if you're new to faith or new to giving, to go from a nothing to a something, and then a something to a tithe. That's where you pick them out, you start working on building up the repetition of giving, like a generosity muscle. And you keep going until you get to obedience, which is what we call a tithe. And that's fantastic if you're newer to giving and you're working on something. I think that's turning the heat up. Way to go. I commend you for that. But there are those of us that get in the room who get stuck at a something. And we've been at a something for years. And sure, it's better than cold, but if you just stick to a something, what happens? Again, lukewarm. We stop turning up the heat anymore. And the goal is to continuously grow in giving. It's like we forget that Christ can do more with 90% than we can do with 100%, right? You give it away and you let Christ help you make it more than you could have done with if you would have held on to everything. It's a biblical principle. I challenge you to practice it, to try it out. You want to know spiritually lukewarm looks like, to cool when it comes to Christians in the church? When you don't give out of a relationship with Jesus, but you give out of performance. Where it's, the pastor do a good job this week? Did the pastor say something that bothered me? Did the ministry change the light over here? I don't know if I feel about dark walls, kind of like the wood walls. Let me pull that back. I don't know how I felt about him doing this or them doing this. And so if you're responding out of giving, out of who I am, well, first of all, let me just say this. I'm not intentionally trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just a bozo at times and flub it. I love you, but please don't give because you like Pastor Chris or not. That is not the goal. I want you to give out of your relationship with Jesus, out of an overflow with what God's doing in your life, because I'm going to let you down. Because no matter how hard I try, I still fall short of who God has called us to be. And so I would encourage you, again, throw that back up, to evaluate your time, talent, and treasure, because this helps you figure out where you're at with your spiritual temperature. And then you can overall say, okay, and again, this isn't a negative, this is just being real. We're going to step out of denial, and you can say, in some areas, I'm hot. In other areas, I could use a little work. And here's what I'm going to do to course correct it. And you have a family meeting with your spouse if you're married. So what are we going to do about this? How can we just turn it up a little bit this season to get a little bit hotter? That's why I love the Christmas offering. Because the Christmas offering focuses on time, talent, and treasure. And I know what you're thinking. What? How's the Christmas offering focus on time and talent? I get how it focuses on treasure, but how's it focus on time and talent? You can go to the Christmas offering slide. That should be next. Here's how it works. Again, like I said in the hosting, we're encouraging those who call Wilson Avenue their home church and are excited about the mission here to give towards the Christmas offering so we can ready the resources and be prepared for what God calls us to next year, because we believe there are some God-sized opportunities coming down the pipe. And I believe that God wants to do miracles in and through you. And so in this season, yes, it's all about the treasure when it comes to the Christmas offering. But what does the Christmas offering do? It prepares us so January through Easter, we're ready to invest time, and we're ready to do outreach efforts, and we're ready to reach people with new opportunities that are coming up down the pike. And so we are just so excited that it's all three. And this is what's great. The Christmas offering helps you turn the heat up. It helps you evaluate where you're at and choose, am I going to spiritually lift my temperature here? Now, you don't have to give to the Christmas offering to do that, but that's just the tool that I have used throughout the years to help me course correct where I am at spiritually, where I'm at with my time, where I'm at with my talent, where I'm at with my treasure. And you might be thinking, well, what about like all the rules of following Christ? That comes out through time. Where if you're worried, if you're following Christ and sinning, you spend enough time with Jesus and he'll make you feel convicted. He'll nudge your heart into saying, we should cut that out, shouldn't we? We should probably stop that. That's how it works. And so as we close today's conversation, that's my challenge to you. Will you evaluate where you're at in those three categories? Regardless if you're going to join us in the Christmas offering or not, regardless if you never come back, which I'll cry, but regardless if you never come back, I want God's best for you. And I believe that Christ wants all of his followers to be all in and spiritually hot so they can help people find and follow Jesus. Would you pray with me?